What's going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Jen Piacenti, and this is another edition of Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. Jen, final approach. We're getting a baseball season. Are you ready to go before action begins?
1 week, Fensty. 1 week from today, we will be hearing play ball. I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
I am as well, Jen, but for some that decided to actually redraft their original leagues, they still got a week worth of drafting left to go, Jen. So I thought, as you and I were talking, I've got the Queen of Diamonds, at least with me here at Jen Piacenti. So we got to talk about some final approach strategies here.
Yeah.
And Jen, I got to ask you this here because I'm continuously watching the news, as we always are, on fantasyalarm.com and for our shows on SiriusXM, about whether or not everybody's going to make it to camp, whether or not that there are players missing, whether or not we should be paranoid about players leaving and missing part of the season, which in a 60-game season, missing 10 games could be pretty critical. So let's start with someone who's being drafted right at the top of boards, Mike Trout. Are you going to be avoiding Mike Trout if, let's just say, you have the first, second, or third pick?
I'm 100% avoiding Mike Trout. I just don't trust that he is going to play the full 60 games, and it's too expensive. And if I have a first, second, or third pick, I would so much rather go with Christian Yelich. Part of my reasoning is that I'm a little concerned about any of the guys that have really big contracts because, quite honestly, they don't need to play. And if there's any risk to their health or someone around them, or they're having their first child, why should they? The Angels aren't contending. Sorry, Angels fans, you're probably not contending. I shouldn't say they're not contending. It's 60 games. Anyone can be contending, but they're probably not contending. It probably isn't worth it for him to take on a lot of risk or miss the birth of his child or things like that. So for me, I'm staying away from it. Now, if Mike Trout is falling so far as 8, 9, 10, how can you not take Mike Trout at that point? Because even 3/4 of Mike Trout is better than most players, right? So he's a 5-tool player. You want him, but if I have another option in my first few picks, I'm not going with Mike Trout. And Christian Yelich is someone I think will play. He's even worked even more on his swing in the off season. I absolutely adore Christian Yelich. He's my number one. Ronald Acuna is young and hungry. I'm really leaning towards young, hungry guys this year. This is their one chance to really make an impression in the league. Why wouldn't they play? Obviously, we have to understand anything can happen in COVID-19. You know, anyone could get sick. Anything can change. That's a risk we're taking across the board. But if I'm putting my chips a little more one way than another, I'm putting it on the slightly younger, slightly hungrier guys. So that moves up Ronald Acuna for me as well.
Yeah, I'm hanging on to something you just said because it's hard for me to avoid Mike Trout, especially if I'm in that 3 spot. And something you just said, well, 75% of Mike Trout is better than a lot of other players in the league. Well, that could be the case, Jen, because if he does leave and miss, let's just say 10 games, 15 games or so, if you're taking quarantine into effect, then you're still essentially not getting 100% Mike Trout, but you're still getting 70% Mike Trout. Maybe the problem is we don't know if he's coming back. That's
exactly
the big part. So if he leaves, you have to hope that he loves baseball that much that he's going to be itching to come back and not too engulfed with what's going on at home, Jen. I've never had a newborn at home, but from everything I hear, it's a 24/7 job, 48 hours a day job from what I hear from some people.
So on that note, maybe he will be ready to come back to baseball. Honey, I gotta go. Bring home the bacon. You stay here. I'm just gonna get a few weeks of working. So yeah, that's possible. But yeah, 3/4 Mike Trout is still great. But is it great enough to pass up somebody else you could get? Would you rather have 3/4 Mike Trout or 100% potentially Christian Yelich or Ronald Acuna? So that's your decision. So it's all, what's your risk aversion? I just am concerned a little bit. Now, we do know the reason Buster Posey bowed out of the season is because he is adopting 2 young twins that are high risk, and God bless them. They have all the help in the world, and I'm glad Buster Posey took the season off. But it is a little easier for someone like Buster Posey to take a season off than someone that's making league minimum. So that's why I'm really liking these guys like Austin Riley. And by the way, not too worried about Austin Riley with Yasiel Puig now signing in Atlanta. I just want to say I think it's going to be a little bit before Puig gets up to speed. I think they'll probably play Puig in the outfield. They'll move Mazzara to DH. Freddie is still out. There's opportunities for Riley to earn his place. Camargo, maybe not. Don't worry about Austin Riley. He's still worth a late round dart shot. This guy is, has the power to be a 40 home run hitter. And if he starts out hot, remember we're starting with 30-man rosters. So if he starts out hot, they're not going to not play him. So if you already believe in Austin Riley, this doesn't change anything that Yasiel Puig signed there. I've had that question a few times, so I just wanted to address that.
Well, I want to address the catcher position. You mentioned Buster Posey.
Yeah.
And in those 2 catchers starting leagues, and Jen, we've talked about this before. 2 catchers starting. What's the purpose? What's the point? I can't stand it. It makes it that much harder. I don't want to think about catcher. I just want to go for a dollar value guy, and that's it. But with 2 catcher leagues, if you're drafting in the next week, how are you approaching the position? Because I feel like even for a position like catcher, you can't really throw as many darts because of the shortened season.
Yeah, I think you just have to assume that everyone's going to be in the same position at catcher where everyone's just going to have junk. Robinson Chirinos left spring training yesterday, I believe, with a twisted ankle or something. So that's even another less, I don't know what you're going to do. Obviously, if you have JT Realmuto, you have Wilson Contreras, there's a few people that are going to be pretty valuable there. And you got middle guys, Tucker Barnhart, Mike Zunino. Those are good targets. And then after that, just, everybody, and Mitch Garver, after that, just say, everybody else is in the same boat as I am. Don't panic about it. I don't think this is the season to try to accumulate a huge advantage at catcher, but then again, maybe it is. Maybe if you're the one JT Realmuto owner, but in a short season, anybody could be a JT Realmuto. So I don't know. To me, catcher, I'm still $1 for me. I'm not putting any money there.
I did one mock draft of the 17 that I did with the mock draft army for baseball between March and now. And you saw the team that I put together because I wanted to see what it would be like, where I would be sacrificing, where I would have to spend more focus round 10 to around 15 if I took Realmuto when I did, which was, I believe, in the 5th round. And with that, Jen, the reason why I did it was because with all of the uncertainty going on, I want to try to get the top guy. Now, I can't say the same about Gary Sanchez. You mentioned Contreras, but there's got to be a sacrifice that I have to make. And if I have a team in which I drafted Mike Trout, I don't know if it can afford getting JT Realmuto because I'm already going to have to make up that power, and then maybe I have to slide catcher down the priority list.
Yeah, I don't think there would be a team where you would take Mike Trout and JT Realmuto because I think you'd want to have another pretty strong lock in there, maybe a George Springer, someone, around there. I guess George Springer might be going a little earlier than that. I'm trying to think. You may want to do is be getting a closer in round 5, right? I mean, that may be what you want to do in round 5, maybe not go after a catcher. So, again, though, JT Realmuto is a special talent. He's the only one that's probably also going to steal for you. So there is some advantage there. And he's got average. There's not a lot of players that have average. We need to check in on Willens Astudillo. He's someone that originally I was kind of hoping to sneak in there with the catcher eligibility that plays other positions. So maybe you can move him around and kind of get some advantage there. But again, we just have to watch camp to see what they're doing. And that's what's really important right now, guys. We have a week left that you can still be keeping your eyes on these camps. And at Fantasy Alarm, Greg Jewett does an incredible job of summarizing the most important things that are going on for every single camp. For instance, we don't know what the rotation is going to be in Houston because until today, Josh James, who is a candidate for, the 4th in the rotation, hadn't even shown up to camp. Now we know it's because of the birth of his first child. So I think he will be there. I think he will earn one of those spots, but Jose Urquidy still not shown up. So now we've got Framber Valdez in the mix. We've got Austin Pruitt in the mix. And one of my personal favorites is I think everyone should think about Brad Peacock. Don't forget this guy started a few seasons ago. He's got the filthiest slider. He can be used in long relief. He can be used as a starter. And that's someone that's maybe going to cost you $1 or $2 at the end. Much like a Ross Stripling or a Carlos Martinez, he's someone that's kind of a swingman. I am absolutely loving those kind of players in this short season. I'm loving Alex Wood. There's a lot of people. I mean, this is just, I know it's frustrating, but it's also really exciting because this is a totally different way to play, and it's new strategy and it's fun.
Now, at this point, because stolen bases, I don't know how much you're expecting from your players. For me, at this point in this type of season, I'd like to see 6 to 8. That would with players that I'm targeting stolen bases from. Now, I wasn't targeting. We talked about this many months ago. Malik Smith. That's who you're getting if you want those stolen bases. However, with this current situation, even though he wasn't an active draft target of mine, now being in the situation we're in, 60 games, that way we don't have to focus on stolen bases as much. If I'm sitting in there in the 12th round or so, 13th round, and I want to tap him up, on the shoulder and say, come to my team, Malik Smith, does he have more value in the shortened season in your eyes?
I don't think so. I think he has the same amount of value he had before. It's still contributing just really one category.
Right.
That's my main concern. Now, there's two schools of thought about this from experts. And I know I'm in the much smaller school of thought. Maybe I'm the only one in this school of thought, actually. But I don't think we should be prioritizing single category contributors. I think they should be very, very late picks, because we just don't have time. And so if they don't contribute in that single category, so if you're taking Malik Smith, you are not taking power, you are not taking average, you're not taking, maybe you'll get a few runs, really you're doing it for speed. Well, if he doesn't come off to a hot start in the first couple of weeks and get you those bags, how long are you going to let him sit there on your roster and tank all your other ratios? You just can't do it. So for me, I'm not doing it until very late. And what I'm doing instead is trying to draft players that I think will give me a little bit of everything. Yasiel Puig is one such player. Kyle Tucker, someone that may not have had an opportunity before, but now has those 5 categories. Derek Fisher, those people. I'm also looking at Esker Mercado. There's a lot of people out there, and I am bumping up players like Trevor Story, Francisco Lindor, Jose Ramirez. I like those guys a lot in the first round, and would consider taking them ahead of Mike Trout even. I know, blasphemy.
No, listen, if you don't want Trout, you're not going to go after Trout. For me, I have a different school of thought, because I have always been under the belief, and when it comes to fantasy sports, that it's not just about one player, even if it's your first round pick. And that's something you can't really hold it on a pedestal. But for me, and there have been plenty of people in our space that are saying I'm avoiding Mike Trout, there's a lot of uncertainty there. But if I am in that third spot and I'm taking Mike Trout, I am going to either take an elite arm right after, and then rounds 3 through probably 7 are going to be all power bats, with 3 of those players being in the outfield. And that is why you have to have that kind of mindset and think 5 steps ahead if you're going after Trout. If you want Trout, you're going to know. You're going to be sitting there. The adrenaline rush is going to be happening. You're going to be getting there. Pick number 1 goes. Let's say it's Yelich. And then you've got, after that, Acuna going. You're going to know if you want him immediately. It's going to take you 5 seconds. But you have to know going in that if you get him, you have to think 5 rounds ahead, Jen. That's at least my opinion on it.
I agree 100%. I mean, everything about this. Now, we talk a lot about handcuffing in fantasy football, but we need to be thinking about that in fantasy baseball even more than usual, right? So maybe it's not his, literal handcuff, but you need to be thinking about every player that you take. Who's their backup? Should you get them late? If you take Max Muncy and Cody Bellinger, that's a good combo, maybe, if you can get them late. I mean, that's probably not a good example because they're probably too close.
That's a lot of position eligibility too, by the way, which is also key in a shortened season like this.
A lot. AJ Pollock is someone I'd like to see late that also has the 5 categories that can fill in at a lot of positions. There's so many ways to think about this. I think I've already spoken about how much I like Howie Kendrick. We're talking about a guy that now is going to have an opportunity to bat every day with the DH. He has like a career batting average of something like 270 career. And he's been in the league forever. And he just the last 3 years, and he's played in every sample size of season, he's had like a 280 or better. I can look up the exact stats. I'm sorry I don't have them in front of me, but it's ridiculous. Add to that, he qualifies everywhere. Second, third, middle in, corner in, utility, and DH, so which is utility. But Howie Kendrick, someone now that should be going way up the boards.
He has to, Jen. I spent about 5 mock drafts with the Mock Draft Army, getting him in rounds 25 or 26 every time. And I believe it was you and Ronas. I asked you both, what's the deal? Why isn't this guy going? And he was at the same spot every time. And I said, okay, he's still there. He's still playing. I had to make sure I checked 3 different websites to make sure he was still active and wasn't released under the table, because I didn't understand why people were ignoring this power that you could get so late in your drafts.
Well, part of it is he didn't show that power until last season. He just showed average. But if you look at his StatCast metrics, real changes happened. I have, let me see. I wrote down all his stats. Let me just run through them for you, because, guys, this is an important late round target that I do believe people are passing on.
Jen, I'll say while you're looking for that, I'll just say this. In my most recent mock that I did, which was about a week ago, he went in the 19th round. Talk about shooting up draft boards. I spent about 4 or 5 getting him in the mid to late 20s. When I say late 20s, in this case, out of 28 rounds, I'll say rounds 26 or even 27. 19, that is a noticeable rise.
And by the way, I totally underestimated how good Howie Kendrick is when I was even just trying to recall just now. His career batting average is .294. And in the last 3 years, he's batted over 300. And it's not just because he played 162 game seasons. Like I said, in 19, he played 121 games and batted .344. In 2018, he played only 40 games and batted .303. And in 2017, he played 91 games and batted .315. So the sample size doesn't seem to matter for Howie Kendrick, and that's really important. Now, last year, he hit 17 bombs in just 121 games. His exit velocity was 91.6. So that's top 8% of the league. And his hard hit rate was 46.3, which is top 6% of the league. He hits all kinds of balls now. Like, he can see the slider, he can see the changeup, all of it. And now he's got regional realignment advantages as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the guy was already facing, Mets pitching, Braves pitching, none of that changes. And he never has to face his own pitching staff, right? He doesn't have to face Max Scherzer. He doesn't have to face Steven Strasburg. So I think Howie Kendrick, if he's still going late, guys, this is such a great dart throw.
I bet. And with the Nationals as well, you mentioned some of the pitchers there, and that's what I was going to ask you about next, what you're doing with elite starting pitching, because you saw what happened with Jacob deGrom. MRI clean. Thank God for those that have him. Woo! Hate to see that. Only the Mets. But when it comes to elite starting pitching, Jen, how are you handling that in your upcoming drafts or auctions? Are you getting one of the potential top 5 guys? Are you going to wait a little bit and then hit it when it goes to round 6, 7, or 8? I mean, how are you handling it with the shortened season? I know when you and I were talking about this before, we got a number on how many games. You and I were both in the camp of waiting until round 6 or 7, get someone like a Darvish or a Glass now. Now, I feel like because of what we're dealing with, so few starts we're going to get from these guys, we have to be looking at someone at the end of the first round or in the second.
So I still don't think so. I'm still going to wait because I'd still rather have the elite bat. And I think there's enough guys. I mean, listen, they're going to be micromanaging these games. So, Dodgers have said they're going to go 4 innings to start. A lot of places are. The only team actually that I've heard that has specifically said we will not go to 6 or 7 man rotations. Joe Girardi said that about the Phillies. So Phillies actually kind of went up a little bit in my mind to make sure I get in the W column, right? But Justin Verlander, he's someone I like. After that, they're still all predicted for 5 or 6 wins, right? There's so many. And if they're not going deep into games, if they're micromanaging because it's a close ball game, like how much more advantage is that going to give you than someone like a Ross Stripling or even in Alex Wood, who really worked in the offseason? And these are players you can get later. Chris Paddock has apparently been phenomenal in spring training. So has Max Scherzer. Justin Verlander has looked good. Zach Greinke has looked good. But Greinke, that's someone that's going pretty late. You can probably start your staff with Paddock and Greinke or Glasnow and Greinke. Giolito is still looking really good. You might be able to get Giolito in the 3rd or 4th round. So I'm not, taking a Jacob deGrom and then finding out, well, the MRI was negative, but something's not right. I can't do it. I can't do it that early.
Right. And that's a big, big problem. And yes, it came back clean, which is good. But now, as I'm going into my drafts, that paranoia meter, which has already been up for the last few months because of COVID, is now even higher. And that's the thing you got to be careful of in drafts. You can't act on emotion, which is why, and we've said this on countless streams and shows, you must have your list of players in front of you. If you can write one for Santa on Christmas, you can write one for your fantasy sports drafts, Jen. So many people don't do this, Jen. And it frustrates me because it keeps you in check when you have your draft targets there, tangible piece of paper, see it right there in front of you. It mentally keeps you in check. And that's why you want your brain to be moving and functioning at a nice pace during the draft. And you don't want it to act out of desperation where you psych yourself out and now you have an unbalanced roster.
And by the way, Fancy, speaking of having your player list, one of your players that you've been drafting a lot has looked absolutely phenomenal in spring training, and that's Lance Mccullers.
Hey, that's one of your players. You were the first that said that, hey, it's okay if you're waiting on pitching. So this was a guy that you were getting in the teens, which I like a lot. And you're still going to be able to get him there. So, again, Jen, you're proving why maybe we shouldn't be overvaluing these aces. And that we should be going after them shortly into the draft once you hit, like you mentioned, round 5, round 6, that area.
Yeah, all those guys are still aces. Please don't misunderstand me. I think they're phenomenal pitchers. And if you want to do that, you're right. You could be right. You could be guessing right. But my gut is that the value, these guys go, once every 5 days. If they bust, that stinks for you. If a hitter goes at least every day. So we got a few chances, but if they have 1 or 2 blow-ups, you're in trouble. So that's why I don't like to weight it too much early, because I just don't know in a shorter season if that's going to work. And I do believe that in a shorter season, a lot more pitchers can be elite.
Right. I love that. Yeah. You have to put it in quotes. Elite. One of the most overused phrases in the fantasy sports industry. And it's blanketing all players. You can't say that. It's kind of like what I say with upside. Everyone has upside. You got to give us more than that. But I digress. Jen, let's talk about auctions, because I actually just wrote the piece for the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide on auctions, and it's something that you can use in not only fantasy football, but other auctions as well, geared towards football, but other sports are included. Now, Jen, the big thing is it's very different strategizing in a baseball than football auctions. You have more positions to cover, and I think that because of that, it's easier to spread your money around, less competition because of the more positions. So when you're going into your next auction, how are you handling your budget? Are you going to be looking to spend more at a certain position? Are you completely reading the room? What are you doing?
I do a little bit of both. So I generally try to do 67% offense and 33% defense. So that's 67% for hitters, about 33% for pitchers. And I think it will be the same, maybe even a little less this year on pitching. And it will be about reading the room. Now, I have an auction on Tuesday night. It's with a bunch of freaking sharks. I'm talking Glenn Colton, Rick Wolf, Adam Ronas.
He's not that good. You're overrating.
These guys are so good, and I'm gonna cream them off. You guys get ready, because you are going down. But really, I mean, some incredible players, and I 15 teams. So we're gonna be dumpster diving a little bit probably at the end. But hey, if there's any season to do it, there's so many cool players you can take darts on. I'm gonna read the room. Again, so here's an interesting question that I think, you kind of brought up with Mike Trout. Now we're not talking about where you are, what your pick is in the draft. You're talking about dollar value. If Mike Trout is suddenly sitting at $35, $36 when you should be 50 something, are you really not going to pull the trigger? You have to.
You do. There's no lock that he's not going to play this season. And that's where you get the $20 discount that if you were going to buy him full price, you weren't going to have. Now you can use in a very critical form in the middle of your draft, spreading it amongst few positions that you haven't addressed. That's when you jump on that value. People are going to be scared, Jen. This is paranoia week. You wanted to name our live show yesterday, the Love Show. This is the paranoia show, because we need everybody to be on their feet when it comes to their auctions and drafts. That's what it's about. This is a season unlike any other. And with that, you're going to have to understand sacrifices you make. And it's important to read news and notes. You mentioned Greg Jewett before. I was reading his snapshots the other day.
So good.
And they're excellent. And he was actually on the Alarm After Hours show, Jen, which you'll be hosting with me midnight Eastern tomorrow night on Sirius XM. But I was actually wondering about some of my sleepers that I had, and I hadn't heard about them in a while. Yoshitomo Sutsugo, that was someone who I liked for some sleeper power. He mentions him in the snapshot, and I do my own research after that because Greg wrote at GJU9, by the way, on Twitter, wrote that he's apparently doing well in the cage. He's doing well in practice and hitting. And I chased down the story and put him back on my draft board. It's almost like out of sight, out of mind. There was a time where I didn't think he was coming back from Japan because of COVID. He came back. He's healthy. He's a power bat in a Rays lineup that needs that power. Why not? And because of that note from Greg Jewett, that put him right back in my radar.
Yeah, and same. You read these. Let Greg Jewett do some of the work for you, okay? Let him give you the summary, and then you go pick out the names. They're like, oh, yeah, that's right. I like that guy. And then do exactly what Fenty did. Go chase down the story. And the thing about baseball is we're going to tell you, hey, this guy's better than this guy. We're going to rank them and tell you. But you know what? It's about your guys. You got to have your guys. And it doesn't matter if we don't like your guys. If you like your guys, it's your team and it should be fun for you. And like I said, if Austin Riley is your guy, go get Austin Riley. He's your guy.
Right. And don't be afraid to spend up a little bit on getting your guys as well. In fact, one of the strategies I talk about in that article about auctions, and you can apply this to any fantasy sport for auctions, that you got to have your list in front of you, and you got to make sure that if there's someone that you love, no matter at what tier, that you're going to put a +3 or a +5 valuation on that player that you already have. Jen, you're in an auction. You have Mike Trout down for, let's say, $30, and you're willing at $30 to add a +3 to that value. You're in your auction. You're seeing him now go at around 30, 31. That right there gives you the permission you need mentally, looking at the paper that you wrote. That will give you the confidence to spend up a little bit more. You can't be married to specific values. You always have to account for variable change in drafts and auctions.
I agree 100%. If there's a guy you really love that you see your team being built around, just like Kansas City, you pay the guy. And then you figure it out, because especially in this season, there's going to be so many fantastic people coming up and on hot streaks, and you're going to need to be working the waiver wire. So get your guys that you love, that you got to have, and then know that the rest of them, there's no reason to worry. Oh, but I didn't get the $3 player. I had to get the $1 player. Let me tell you something. There's no difference between the $3 and the $1 player in a 60-game season. So get your guy.
Right. And that's why you need a big max bid as well. That if you have someone at the end that you really like, rather than throwing them out when half the league still has enough money to price you up or bid you out, then you just wait until you have the max bid of $3 and everybody else is $2 or $1. And then when you nominate the player, you nominate for $3. You don't play the bidding game. You set the standard at that point. $3, you hope people back off. Because you don't want to miss that $3 bid, and you don't want to miss your max on that. And you'll have to be quick to the trigger with making sure you're the team on internet software that registers first to their software that you could get that $3 bid. It's not a guarantee.
And by the way, guys, and I know most of this is on internet, and this is maybe more of a live auction mind trick, but there is definitely something to throwing out players at the end of the draft for $2. Because people are fine to go from 1 to 2, but they have a real issue going from 2 to 3. So if there's a guy you like late, throw him out for $2. Don't be afraid of that extra dollar. Oh, I don't want to spend that extra dollar, because what's going to happen is you'll end up spending an extra $2 or you'll miss out on the guy.
Yes, and it doesn't matter what sport it is. Do not leave money on the table. You spend all of your money. Was in an auction recently when someone left $16 in a fantasy football auction. $16.
Oh my gosh, that's a Max Kepler. What are you doing?
That's like going to Blockbuster back in the day and being able to rent 3 to 4 movies or 3 movies and get some candy with it, or the popcorn that they had, the caramel corn that they had in the corner. That's a big value in real life. What do you think it is in fantasy? It's huge. $16? You need to spend all your money. $1, still unacceptable to me. But 16, that is very, very ultra unacceptable. Do not leave money on the table unless your league has a rule that whatever you have left over, carry it over to Fab for waivers. Outside of that, that's the one excuse. You have no excuse for leaving money at the table. So Jen, when you're in that auction, make sure even if you see Adam Ronis leaving money on the table, and he better not, because I've been telling everybody that with shows with him on it that you can't do it. Jen, do not leave any auction money on the table.
I won't. Trust me. I will not leave a cent on the table.
No, and that's for all of you as well. I want everybody now to trust me. Pinky swear on that. Please do yourself a favor, because unless there's a way you can use that money, you're going to lose it. You don't use it, you lose it. That's the old saying. So that's why it's very important in auctions. Jed, final question I have for you. Any sort of division between, for those leagues that don't designate pitcher spots, that just have, let's say, 9 pitcher spots, how is the division between starters and relievers? Is there a certain amount of closers currently with the starting job that you want on your team?
So it turns out, guys, that you do need to check your league rules for this and see what they're doing about innings pitched minimums. So you don't want to go too far in an extreme. But for me, I'm only worried about having 4 or 5 starters. And the rest for me are going to be, I want 2 elite closers if I can. And I'm talking, when I say elite, I'm talking someone like Hader and then maybe like Giles, okay? Because you can afford both of those. And then I want a bunch of guys that are maybes. Rowan Wick. You know, if Craig Kimbrell stinks, kind of looks like he actually stinks for real. Rowan Wick could be in a job soon. Get that guy late. Get some long relievers, like I said, guys, that can close, relieve, or start. So that's a Carlos Martinez. That's a Ross Stripling. People like this we've kind of hammered over and over again. Dylan Betances, Seth Lugo. There's a whole lot. Well, Dylan Betances can't start, but you know what I'm saying. Get these guys that are going to bring down your ratios, that could pick up a save here and there. That's what I would do. And then for the starters, get 4, get maybe 5, and then see what happens, because your long relievers could end up actually giving you the same result as a starter. And you need to have a short leash. You know, one of these guys goes down with COVID-19. You got to get somebody else in as a starter. So you're going to have to be working the waiver wire. And by the way, if you have a weekly league, please strongly consider making it a daily league. I know it's a lot more work, but what else are we doing these days? It takes 5 minutes and it'll be a lot more fun and you'll feel a lot more control of it. You'll be less frustrated.
I have no time to set my lineups, Jen. I can't do that. 2 minutes is way too long.
Well, you know what Jim Bowden would say about that.
Not verbal retweet.
He'd say, take your phone in the library with you.
Yeah, that's it. That's what you're doing in the bathroom. That's how you get time. There you go. You do your business and you do your other business, which is your fantasy lineups. That's what it's all about.
That's not the way I would do it, but I mean, it's an approach. It's certainly an approach.
Listen, we're all about baby steps. We're all about improving. We're all about winning titles in fantasy sports. At Jen Piacenti is Jen Piacenti. At Fensty Sports, myself, Justin Fensterman. Catch us as a tag team tomorrow night, midnight Eastern, on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio for Alarm After Hours, Sirius 210, XM 87. We always dominate. Why is that? Because there isn't any other option. Final week to go. Let's get it. Let's win. Let's crush it. Good luck.